Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Sorry for being just a couple minutes late. We just had some technical issues, but we are so excited to jump in with you all and talk about what journalists really want and how to secure media coverage for your financial advisory firm. So you'll just have to excuse me right off the top of the bat here for sounding so terrible. I have a really bad head cold and I may have to go on mute to blow my nose a couple times, but that's just everybody's kids are back in school. So that's, I guess, life these days. Behind the scenes, we have Amanda Larson, who will be moderating. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in either the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to your question as soon as we can. And this is a live Q&A, so keep the questions coming. I already have a list of about 6 questions that were sent in ahead of time by you overachievers, so we'll make sure we get to those. But for everybody else, go ahead and ask away because we have great company here today. I'm so excited to introduce Nicole Casperson from Investment News. Did I say your last name right?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Great. And we're going to learn more about her in just a second when I introduce her. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. And just while I am getting these things all set up, let us know in the chat box, have you or your company ever been featured in any online publication before? And also, we would love to know, what news do you all read? What industry news do you read every morning when you wake up? Is it investment news? Is it the Wall Street Journal? Is it a local publication, your local newspaper? I'm always super interested to see what people are reading and paying attention to, and I'm sure Nicole would love to see that as well. So tell us in the chat. Okay, Leonard says he hasn't, and he's reading investment news right now. Love it, Leonard.
There you go, a new reader.
A new reader, that's right.
Welcome.
Nancy, she said she's got 2 articles that have been published, and Kevin says he's been published in the Wall Street Journal 2 times via Haro pitches. Oh, that's great. We'll have to tell everybody what Haro is for those who might not know. Help a reporter out is what it stands for. Emma says she reads the Investor's Business Daily and the Wall Street Journal. We've got people reading the Toronto Sun and the National Post. Somebody's here to take notes for their husband who can't make it. Well, welcome to you too. Simon, he said featured, yes, shout out to Nicole. So I guess you've used Simon there for a...
Hey, what's up, Simon?
So we've got a lot of investment news, Market Watch, Wall Street Journal, but other ones, keep them coming. So again, we are going to be covering a couple different things today, but before we go any further, let me just reintroduce your 2 speakers here. I'm Samantha Russell, and I am the Chief Evangelist at FMG Suite and 20 over 10. So glad you could all join us today. If we haven't connected before, please connect with me on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can see my 2 handles there. I often am working on different pieces of content and like to showcase advisors whenever I can. So would love to connect with you on those 2 platforms. And our wonderful guest here, Nicole, we'll reintroduce her. Nicole, as we said, is a reporter for Investment News. I also put her Twitter and LinkedIn handles there, so you can feel free to go ahead and connect with her. And I also have her page on the Investment News website where you can see all of the fabulous articles and pieces that she has written. And this would be a great time, I think, Nicole, for you just to tell us a little bit about what kinds of stories that you write for Investment News. What do you cover?
Yeah, for sure. So yes, hi, Nicole. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and Sam for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. And thanks for being open to just hearing my thoughts. So I've been covering FinTech for the wealth management industry and financial advice industry for about 1.5 years now. I started in May 2020 with Investment News, virtually in the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic, but deep pandemic times. So interestingly, I've really had to hone in on my own use of technology and to really excel in my role. And I think that connection has helped, kind of frame the type of stories that I'm interested in. Obviously, the last 18 months or however long it's been, it feels like a decade we've been in this pandemic, has really shifted what is important to people. And obviously that shifts what is worth covering. And to me, the way that financial services technology is able to provide more access to building better financial, futures, building wealth, investing, is some of the things I'm interested in covering. How are financial advisors leveraging technology to open up their services to more people, to open up their services even in better ways, so that their time is more freed up for them to focus on the overall wellness of their clients, which is really the value proposition of financial advisors these days. And technology is the magical tool that helps you guys do that. So I'm always covering from things, I'll do like the back office things, or, AI and automation that helps you guys do your jobs a little bit better and easier. And then, on the other side, I think it's important to highlight the FinTech apps and the robo-advisors and the disruptors out there that are kind of like challenging all of our ways of thinking and showing us that, hey, these traditional ways of doing financial services or financial advice aren't the only ways. So let's, kind of look at ourselves and see how we can do better and make an impact. So that's kind of a good overview for what I'm interested in covering.
Yeah, we'll showcase some more of the pieces that you have written and give people an idea here in just a minute. But let's talk about what we're going to discuss today. And again, we want this to be as useful to all of you as possible. So if there is something that we're talking about and you want to have us go down a tangent and ask another question, that is just fine. So we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of working with journalists, what actually constitutes news and what would make a good press release, how to feature, once you have been quoted, how to feature that on your website or promote it on social media, and also how do you actually build that connection in the first place to get quoted, or on behalf of like the CEO of your company, get those quotes happening. So let's dive right in. I started by asking Nicole for her do's and don'ts, and she sent me a great email just kind of summarizing. So we're going to go through them, and I'm going to have Nicole expand on some of them a little bit more than others. So the first thing, and this kind of goes to how do you even start making these connections, introduce yourself. So many of you are not going to have the emails of the reporters particularly, but social media is a great place to do that. And Nicole, tell us a little, is that where you prefer people to just reach out and introduce themselves?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, interestingly, you'll probably get I might get in trouble for saying this, but like, you'll probably get my attention faster on Twitter. I mean, I'm constantly on there. It's just like this live stream of what's happening today. Sometimes I catch news items from there. And that has been a great resource, especially being virtual this whole time. It's been a great resource to understand who's in the community, who's available. And yeah, people have reached out to me before saying, hey, I specialize in estate planning. Let's like, in case you need a source on that or whatever it is. And to me, that's super valuable. And also just like a little bit more of a casual way to get to know each other. And so that to me is helpful. Yes, feel free to.
And I've always said that, for most advisors, they're asking me like, which platform should I be on? Twitter is not one for client prospecting. Like I've actually never heard of an advisor gaining a client from Twitter, but it is a great place to connect with other advisors, to stay on the pulse of what's happening in the industry, and to connect with journalists. And, one of the tactics that I'll use a lot is if I'm hearing about something or creating my own content and something, I'll send it sometimes to a journalist that I know might be interested based on what they've covered in their beat before, and say like, hey, I don't know if you've seen this, but this is, really compelling. I think one of the things that you just have to be careful to do is not just say, it can't just be bragging about your own company all the time. It has to actually be news, right?
Correct. And that's in the don'ts. And it can tie into the do's a little bit, right? Like the best is I've had, advisors reach out to me and say, oh, this piece of like timeliness, right, is like the number one thing I'm thinking about in my job, right? So is it timely and does it make an impact? So, if an advisor reaches out to me and says, hey, this is happening, Robinhood's IPO is happening, or whatever's happening in the industry, I feel like I can talk about it based on this. Like if you already go ahead and like skip all of the steps of me saying, well, I'm looking for this. Okay, well, I can't provide that or whatever. Like if you just go straight to the chase and say, this is happening and I can talk about X, Y, and Z, then I know now. And if that works for the story I'm pursuing, you'll hear from me, trust me. So that's like a great way to just like, let's just cut to the chase and tell me what you can talk about, because then we don't have to worry about the back and forth.
So when somebody first reaches out and introduces themselves, is it better for them to introduce themselves in conjunction with like, hey, this Robinhood IPO is happening and here's what I have to say about it, like wait for the moment to arise when they could be a good source for the story, or just introduce themselves more generically and say, and here's something like different areas of expertise that I have if you're ever looking for a source?
Yeah, I mean, I think either or works. I think it's totally acceptable to reach out to me, even if there isn't a timely news item happening, because one of the things, I'm always working on more than one story at a time. So every day I'm writing, a story that pertains to like daily news. And those are like short bites of information. And sometimes I'll use like a little analysis in there. But for the most part, I'm always behind the scenes working on like a bigger story. And but who know, like you guys don't know what that is all the time, right? So but if you're reaching out to me and already introduce yourself to me, then I can think, oh hey, like so and so advisor said that they're good at talking about X. I'm gonna save their contact for when I get a chance to work on a story I'm really interested in pursuing. And patience is like the key there, because it could take, it could be like a month from now, it could be 2 months from now. Like say I wanted to follow up a story on like social media and financial advice, which I already kind of did a story on, but I'm thinking about a follow-up. I don't know when that might happen, but like if I know that you're available, I will remember and like put you in my source pool. And so I think introducing right away is totally acceptable, as long as you just have patience.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we have seen work really well too is when people approach the journalist with just the true, the motive is to be helpful and not to have their own spin, because like that's your job, right? As a journalist to come up with the angle of the story. And, you're not going to want to cover somebody who just wants to talk about how great their firm is or some accolade they just won. So, for instance, like I'm thinking Jeff Benjamin from Investment News. I knew he had asked me to be a source on a story about working women in the pandemic and the number of women who left the working world because of the pandemic. And a couple months later, I came across this great firm called the Financial Gym, and they were doing all kinds of things specific for women in the workforce and specifically in financial services. And I reached out to him and just said, hey, I came across this company and it made me think of you based on the last story we talked about. You might want to check them out. Like it had nothing to do with
awesome.
8 feet or 20 over 10, but he ended up writing a whole piece about it. And I got a quote again. And I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way you build your ability to be a go-to source, is not having your own agenda, but really just trying to be helpful.
Right, exactly. Like if you're on the same thing, our missions are not very different, right? Like people get into journalism because they want to make a difference in the world. You guys are in financial advice because you want to make a difference in people's lives. And so like if we're all on the same mission, then that'll resonate and that'll come across. But if your mission is like, yo, my firm's so great, like you've got to feature us, then it's going to be like, I mean, I'm sure you are great, but what would be even greater is if you like align more of your purpose with, the story that's happening or this or that. So totally agree there. And I think that honestly, it just highlights that, every industry is evolving. Like journalism is evolving in the same way that financial advice is evolving. People want to work with people. I think that's like the big epiphany of the last year. And as a journalist, it's the same thing. Like be a human, just like be honest with me. And like if your mission is, to do better in the world, then share with me an angle or your like vision for that. I would say that another way to just cut to the chase is to straight up also just ask me like, hey, like, are you working on a story for this? And like, do you have an angle yet? And I'll let you know. If I don't, maybe you can help me find one, So kind of just like that honesty is really helpful.
That's great. Okay, so let's go to the don'ts, and then we have a couple questions that already came in. So don't get upset at a reporter if your comments or quote don't make it in the article, or get mad if they don't respond to an email. I just wondered, how many people are you talking to every day that, potentially don't make it A, and B, how many people are emailing you, even just pitching you stories?
Right. Yikes. I mean, if you saw my email inbox, you would be terrified. There's so many emails I don't get to, and I would say it's like you can almost make it like 50-50. I probably get, and I might even be lowballing it, but I probably get at least like 30 to 40 email pitches a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of them are not necessarily in the scope, but I could never get to all of those emails. And there's sometimes I run into situations where people do get upset with me if I don't respond to their emails. And I just have to straight up be honest with them. Like, I'm sorry. We're all so busy. We're all going through a lot right now. And so, we're all just trying to like do the best we can. And, but it's no, like, I'm not mad at anybody. It more than likely is just a case of, hey, the story wasn't a fit. And so you'll definitely hear from me if it is. I've definitely had people where, I interviewed them, and sometimes I'm just, an interview isn't a guaranteed quote. That's like, I think, so important. I think a lot of people don't realize that. And you have to think about that and be okay with that. And you never know. I've interviewed someone and like 2 months later used their quote for a different thing than they probably ever thought I was going to use a quote for. And I'll check in with you and make sure that's okay. And most of the time it is, but and that's kind of like the beauty of what I do. Sometimes you could say a quote that's so amazing and evergreen that I can use it later on for like a bigger story than maybe the news story I originally thought I was talking to you. So like the possibilities are kind of endless, and just the connection that you're going to make with me is going to be worth it down the road, because I already know now what you can talk about. And so don't get mad if we don't respond, or if we don't use your quote. I know it's so disappointing, but just know that like you'll more than likely be used at some point down the road if you just kind of maintain the dialogue and be understanding.
I love that. I think one of the questions that someone sent in that goes along with this is, when you're looking for sources, and like, let's say it's something you don't have a source for it already, how do you go about finding that source? Do you just go onto Twitter and ask? Do you reach out to your current network? Are there PR firms that you connect with? What does that look like?
Yes, there's media channels for like FPA. They have like a media query, which sometimes I've used, more than I should, I guess. But I've actually found a lot of great advisors through that. People are pretty great and responsive. And then what ends up happening is, and there's probably plenty of advisors out there that I've used for sources or resources that I met via FPA's media query channel, or like XYPN's media query channel. And we end up, we'll end up connecting on Twitter. And then I'm just going to keep, you say amazing things. I'm going to keep, I'm going to keep using you more and more. It'll get to the point where like I'm bombarding you and you're tired of me. But that's like the two huge ways I first started. Now, if I wanted to go to the Twitter gods and say something, I will. If I'm like, that's usually if I really am having a hard time finding someone. And then that like opens up the floodgates. So, I think that the maybe important thing is, if there's something big happening in the news, to just go ahead and reach out to me, because if I could like avoid going through those like media query holes and like already have some resources to already speak to, then that just eliminates a step for me, and that would be fantastic. Luckily, I've already started to curate a pretty good source pool of advisors, and maybe they're out there in the audience, like Simon, like what's up. But I always want more. Like I want more people. As much as I'd love to reuse the same sources over and over, no one wants to hear from the same people all the time, and so we have to kind of keep that source pool diverse and expansive. So always looking for new people to highlight and give give a little bit of a platform to.
And I think, some of the questions coming in where people were saying, like, if we don't fit within your own particular beat, should we still reach out to you, or is it better to reach out to someone else? I mean, I definitely think also not having all your eggs in one reporter's basket is a good idea. Like, you should connect with multiple journalists at different publications who are covering different topics. But one of the things that's really interesting that I want to show you all is sometimes Nicole might write a story or a journalist might write a story about something that's not going to be actually what your audience is going to be reading, like your clients, but other advisors.
Yeah.
And even though you might not see the benefit in being quoted in that right off the bat, like, well, who cares if my clients aren't reading it? What you're doing is starting to build that credibility and expertise. And you're also getting a link back from a big, huge website with a lot of domain authority, like an Investment News, to your website. So let me just share my screen really quick and show you all what I'm talking about here. So here's one on how texting takes center stage in client communications. Your clients are not going to be reading this. This is an article that Nicole wrote for advisors, right? But you can see here throughout the article, she's got, different people that so here we go. Said Chris Chen, founder of Insight Financial Strategists. So Chris isn't really worried about his clients reading this. He's just wanting to be listed as a source, be helpful to Nicole. When you click on that, it's going to take you to their website, right? This is what we call a backlink, and earning backlinks from major publications like Investment News are huge for your website search engine optimization. So even if the publication isn't one that or this article in particular isn't one that your clients are going to be reading, it's great for the SEO purposes. And it's also great because maybe somebody who writes articles at CNBC that your clients are reading reads this, and then they see you as a future source. I don't know if you want to add to that at all, Nicole, but I think just sometimes people are looking at it just for this one particular piece and not the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. I totally think that advisors are interested in seeing what other advisors are doing, right? I mean, it's like what I said about why I think that the part where, I heavily cover like robo advisors, or I heavily will cover fintech apps. Those technically don't really have a lot to do with actual like RIAs or financial advisors. But what I'm doing is I'm showing you like another perspective. I'm showing you another way of doing the practice. And that's what other advisors, and you can learn from other advisors. And I think that's important. You'd be surprised how much connectivity happens between like all the publications. You can just search a source's name and you'll see, where they're quoted, and it's Investment News or CNBC or the Journal or whatever. And then all that does is, like what you said earlier, it just keeps building and building and building. And like, you end up just growing your own audience. So even though Investment News isn't a publication catered to, your clientele, it's catered for you guys. The connectivity between the great, internet is real. And what Sam is saying is completely right. So the chances of you being seen in some other capacity are really likely, right? Like people will pull out our stories from their own newsletters that they send to clients or something like that. So totally agree with you there.
Yeah. Okay, great. And somebody did ask a great question. A former journalist turned marketing manager asked, what's Investment News policy in general on linking to a source's website? And this definitely goes across the board with different publications, even different journalists. Do you have just one policy about those backlinks, or is it up to each journalist?
Yeah, we actually don't really have like a formal policy that I am aware of.
Might be getting an email after this telling you what it is.
But for the most part, the main policy is more so the number of backlinks that I have in a story. So typically I'll want, 2 or 3 of them to link back to stories that, are maybe a good precursor to the story that I'm writing, so that people can see like what has already been reported on the topic. But for the most part, the reason why for me it's important to add the link to our sources, firms and websites. And sometimes if your firm doesn't, if I can't find your website, I'll just maybe link to your LinkedIn profile. That the reason that's so important is because I also want my readers to see your credibility. So like I want my readers to see, oh wow, okay, so look at their, if your website's awesome and you're able to present yourself just in a super like credible way virtually, then that's just better for me. I mean, it's not like my biggest, when an advisor doesn't have like a website, I find that a little scary. And so I would rather not link to your LinkedIn. And yeah, so that is important it really just boosts your own credibility as well to have, and the story's credibility. If I'm able to link to a website that's full, and well done, and honestly, like even aesthetically pleasing, right?
Yeah. And I think what's, interesting here too, is like if people go and they look at what you've written, so like that one is all about texting advisors, texting their clients. But then this one that you wrote, is all about Britney Spears, and conservatorships. And this is one where if you got quoted in this, and this is something that your firm helps clients or families with, this would be a great thing to be able to feature and say like, oh, I contributed to this piece. So again, every journalist, they might have like their main beat, but there's also other things they can cover that are outside of it, right?
Correct. So I've also morphed, that was a weird term to say, but anyway, I've also become the kind of resident women focused reporter for investment news, largely because of who I am, and largely because it's also something I'm very passionate about. So covering the Britney Spears conservatorship was was beneficial in two parts. One, it was just insanely timely. It was all that was trending in the news. It was all, people were talking about it. But then, the more I dived into it and the more I talked to advisors about estate planning and I spoke with advisors with experience with this, I ended up uncovering the part where, we kind of knew that like Britney Spears conservatorship was a little bit, effed up. And then when I talked to advisors, I really learned that there's some like gaping problems and just like holes in that system. And so between understanding that the conservatorship and the problems that can lie for a lot of people that have mental health issues or have mental disabilities or whatever it is, I learned that from advisors. And if you can put, yourself as an expert on a story like this, that's trending all over like the world, and trending not just in, financial services, but like in culture and all of the things, I mean, that just puts you even more on the map. And so this was like a really special one. And so I'm always, it's something I guess to like keep in mind with me as well. I'm covering fintech, but I'm always going to cover things, that have to do with just women and financial services, and giving more access to people of all kinds of diverse backgrounds, whether it's, physical or, mental diversity, and ensuring that they have all of the right tools they need. And sometimes, and a lot of times, fintech is very intertwined into that. So.
Yeah. So just to walk us through Daniel here, who was heavily quoted in this piece.
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting for people to connect the dots. So did you already have him as a source? Did he reach out to you about this? Did you see him posting something? How did you find him?
So Daniel came through an FPA query. So he just responded. So that was great. That really is like an A1 source. And then we ended up also like connecting on Twitter. And why he was so heavily quoted is because he has experience with conservatorships. So that was like, wow, oh my, to actually speak to an advisor that has done this, that was able to speak on, different aspects of it. He was able to specifically speak to like Britney's case, and then specifically speak to like what this is in general, and give me a sense of, because honestly, before the Britney Spears situation, I mean, I don't know, we weren't really talking too much about like conservatorships, in my opinion. And so to give me a full breakdown of why this is happening to her and how this can happen to other people was super important. So he had the experience, and that's like, I believe that was one of the first things he said off the bat. And that just made me go, oh, wow, like this guy's worked with conservatorships. Another person quoted in this, oh yes, is Noah, a little bit lower down. And he actually worked at Bessemer Trust. And so that for me was another like, ooh, like he once worked with the wealth manager that was once in charge of Britney Spears' thing. So like, if you're already connected to this news that I'm writing, holy moly, like you will be such a gem,
Yeah.
such a gem to me. And that's why those two really stood out.
Okay, great. All right, so let's just talk though. Okay, let's say you do get quoted in a piece like this, whether it's a piece Nicole's writing or it's in CNBC or wherever it is. What do you do to actually promote it? So I know we have other questions. Don't worry, we will get to more of your questions with other specifics. But I just want to showcase this because I feel like this is a real missed opportunity that people forget about. And since we do websites and digital marketing for advisors here, I can't let you all go without hearing this. So one of the other reasons why getting featured in these publications is so great is that when somebody comes and lands on your website, you have just seconds to make a first impression. And visuals, our brains process imagery 60,000 times faster than text. So if you can put right on the homepage of your website, like a as featured in or as seen on section, and include the names of well-known publications, it's going to just, as quick as a blink of an eye, reinforce your credibility and showcase that expertise. So it's telling the viewer of your website something about your firm without you having to say, I'm an expert in X, Y, or Z, right? These other publications have seen that to be true. The other thing is it doesn't have to just be large, well-known publications that are across the entire country. Here's an example of a firm who specializes in working with physicians. So they have the Medical Economics Journal, AMA, the White Coat Investor, right? Publications that their clients and prospects are going to be aware of because that's what they read, because that's their niche audience. So it doesn't have to be always, national publications. And then the last thing I just wanted to give a tip about is you don't actually want to link to the story itself that you were featured in from these hyperlinks. And that's because just the way that journalism works, those links can change, they can be taken down for service-based reasons. There's lots of things that can happen, and you do not want a broken link from the main page of your website. So use the logo of the publication, but you don't need to hyperlink to that article itself. If you want to highlight the article as a whole, you can create a blog post and say last week I contributed to X, Y, or Z and kind of add quotes of your, the different excerpt that what you said. So following up from that, once you get quoted, how do you promote it on maybe social media? So people who aren't already a client or people who are clients, how do you do it in a way that's not sounding braggy? So I just have two examples here. Here's one: fall's a great time to get cozy with your finances. In this NerdWallet article, I joined financial planning colleagues to share tips for ending the tough year well. And you can see, importantly, they tagged NerdWallet in the post, and then they have some different hashtags. And here's another example of somebody who was on a podcast and, they talk about what they talked about on the podcast. They link to the episode, and then again, they tag the people that were interviewing them. So if you are quoted, let's say Nicole quoted you in that Britney Spears piece, and a lot of your clients are coming to you for both, estate planning and financial planning, you might say something like, you can't open a newspaper these days without reading about Britney Spears' conservatorship. I had the pleasure of talking with Nicole from Investment News and sharing, how we've seen this play out with our own clients and what you might want to be aware of. And then link to the article and make sure you tag both Nicole and Investment News as well. So those are just some things that I wanted to, give you examples of how you can actually share it in a way that is promoting the piece and not just so much promoting yourself. Hopefully that's helpful. All right. Anything you wanted to add to that, Nicole, before we take some questions?
No, I mean, I think that was good. That was good advice. I actually take the same approach in my Twitter. I'm never just gonna say, oh my gosh, look at this amazing story that I wrote. Aren't I great? Right. If people want connection to why you decided to pursue something, and if you are good at telling the story of why you are doing something, that's the magic thing that everyone is kind of after right now. So yeah, and I find Twitter is a great place to be punchy with it because you're limited to that 140 characters. So I liked your take on you can't get away from a newspaper without reading about Britney Spears or crypto or something, right? couldn't go to a conference without talking about cryptocurrency. Check out this panel discussion story on X. But yes, great ideas.
Great. Okay, so one of the questions that came in was from Kevin, who I believe is here live with us. Hi, Kevin. And he asked, how do paid press release services like PR, web, or Newswire work? And if so, is there one that is best? So I don't know how much you use them. So maybe you should tell us for, your use of them in general might be different than how useful they are to journalists as a whole.
Right.
But I can explain if you don't want to, how they work in general.
Yeah, I mean, feel free. You could probably better explain how they work. If that makes sense to do that first before I share my version.
So basically, the way that these paid press release services work is they're just a distribution system that is going to get your news, whatever it is, out in front of both journalists and just publications as a whole across the entire country. And for any of them, you're paying them to get the word out. And oftentimes then smaller publications or those that might not even have as many writers on staff, sometimes will pick up the press release as a whole and just republish the whole release. To be honest, that is not what people, the average consumer, think about all of your reading behavior. Do you read press releases that you see? Most likely not, right? So the press release itself isn't the goal to get out as much as to get it in front of the right people who will pick it up and turn it into a story about something relevant. So if you wrote a book, or somebody from your team was, featured on CNBC, you might think like, that's great breaking news. We should create a press release. Well, press release could cost you $250. Chances are no major news publication is going to care, I hate to say it that way, if you were on CNBC, and they're not going to turn it into a news story. Now, if you have a local newspaper in your local hometown and they want to feature business owners in the community, it would be better to spend your money to just go to them directly and say, hey, our CEO, who's been a wealth manager here in Des Moines, Iowa for the last 30 years, also was on CNBC, and he shared tips about, tips for small business owners during this pandemic times. They'd be more likely to write a story about it in your local hometown than a big publication would be to pick it up. So I would say for the majority of advisory firms we work with, like 99%, you don't need to worry about those paid press release services because your news as a advisory firm isn't going to be, quote, big enough to get picked up. Like press release services are going to be more used for large tech companies or Fortune 500 companies. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what it is in general. And when you might want to use it. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. It's going to be even better for me, and I would think most journalists would agree. Instead of me finding a press release or you guys sending me one, what would be even more amazing is if, say your advisory firm has a PR person that can email me or reach out to me and say, hey, we are doing X, Y, and Z, or we have, a new whatever. If you were to tell me about it and then say, hey, we have our CEO or our president or the top person at your firm available to discuss it, and now we're just, talking about the details, and why that is better than a press release for a journalist is, one, now my conversation with whoever leads your firm, that's exclusive to me. That's exclusive content to me. And that's why, and PR people probably realize this, when you send me a press release, the first thing I'm asking is who's available to talk about it, because what you write in the press release is free for everyone. Like everyone can know, like, I'm going to say the same thing as another publication. I would rather not. I'd rather have my own exclusive content. So like, if you can, share, if you don't want to go through a PR Newswire or a Business Wire, which are pretty much the main two that I would say I ever look at, outside of just searching for press releases at other, like at companies themselves. If you reach out to me directly and say, hey, we're going to drop this news ahead of time, is even better. Like you're more than likely to get like something out of me if it's ahead of time too. In a couple of days, we have our CEO available to discuss the details on it with you at XYZ times. Wow, holy moly. Like, thank you. Let's get to it. Like that is way more valuable to me than just like, here's a press release. because I don't spend a lot of my time searching for press releases, really, to be fair.
Yeah, and I think to, keep in mind again, what Nicole's writing about, she's writing stories for other advisors. So if you message her saying, we just launched a brand new program, it's like a mini robo within our firm. So people who don't meet our AUM minimums can get access to this robo, but we're also going to have a subscription-based model for them. And we're targeting women. So we're pairing it with career advice and specifically for women and workshops. And it's something really unique in a new program. She might not write a whole story just about that, but if she's already covering another story about unique business models that advisors are doing to target women, it could get added into that story. So just trying to think again of like, what is going to always putting it in, what's in it for the other person? Like, how can they use it to make it, their stories better? So,
right.
And I've seen a couple people say things like, oh, I wrote a book thinking that would get me more press and it didn't. I'm not surprised because it's all about you. You got to figure out a way to tie it to something that the journalist is covering that you can, kind of latch on to.
Right. I mean, it's like, so I tend to call these, this isn't an official journalist term, I just call these like trendy pieces, which really is, okay, so one RIA firm or one tech provider is just rolled out at like a new feature for, let's pretend like it's crypto. Okay, maybe I'm not going to write about, maybe they're not a big enough firm for me to just write about them, but 2 other firms also just rolled it out this week. Weird. Why is this happening all at the same time? And I mean, I know you won't be able to time your news with like other people, but the point is, if something happens, you're totally right. I may not just write about your firm because it feels a little small. I would tie it into what else is happening in the world that, makes what your firm doing notable. And maybe it isn't just that, maybe you are, working with clients on crypto, or you did that robo-advisor option or whatever. Maybe tell me, like, what is happening in the world today that makes that notable? Maybe it's institutional adoption. Maybe it's, more robo-advisors are struggling to get clients. I don't know. I mean, that's not true, but like, you know what I mean? Like, tell me what's happening in the world that makes what you're doing notable, because then I can tie it into a bigger picture. And that's really what trade publications are about. Like, I think it's at the end of the day, the super like the super like constant breaking news that's for the wires, that's for the Bloombergs, that's for the Reuters of the world. But the trade publications that focus on our niche, for me, the reason why our paywall is valuable is because you guys are looking to us to tell you why this is notable, right? Like, that's the whole point. We're here to say, hey, like, this breaking news happened and it matters because of this, and show you the different perspectives as to why that matters. And that's what's so valuable about a trade publication that focus on a specific industry, is to take the big news out there and relate it back to why
I love that
it matters. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, such a good answer. So I know we're coming up on 45 minutes here. We don't want to keep people all afternoon, but a couple other questions. We don't.
We don't want to do this all day. Just ask me questions on Twitter.
Yeah, there you go. Somebody asked, Zachary asked, does having designations like CFP give you a better chance of getting published?
I guess not necessarily. If you're, I guess it's something, if you're like working at an advisory firm, I would imagine you have that, but that's a good point. I shouldn't just imagine that, right? I guess it could help in a sense, but not really. I noticed that is something that advisors like to have on the ends of their names. When I quote you, it won't be included. I'll just call you a financial planner, advisor, whatever you are, and what firm you're at. So yeah, the short answer is like, it doesn't necessarily help, but it's always nice for me to know what you are and what you're distinguished as.
Got it. Another question was, if you're working on a story and everyone's sort of answering the same, like having the same take, does having an alternate take make it more likely that you would be a source that's included? Like, should people be thinking about when they're talking to a journalist, saying something that's going to be different from what, the other 10 people that you interview are saying?
Yeah, that's a yes. ahead of the curve you are, whoever asked that question, because correct. That's something that for the most part, I will go to analysts in the industry for that. But if an advisor can give me that, that's awesome. And that's something that you could also kind of cut through, the back and forth if you literally just tell me, maybe you do have two sides of the story here, because that's a part of my job, right? Like to show the different angles and the different perspectives. So yeah, absolutely. If you're able to say, oh, this robo advisor's new feature is great because of this, of this, but it also could be seen as, the cons or this, that's super helpful, right? Because as much as I would love for everything to be like rainbows and butterflies, it isn't. So I do need to expose those sides that, make things more challenging and maybe are more of the cons. So if you can present that to me and have those different angles, then yes, you're more than likely going to get more of a feature.
And that's one of the things I've been really trying to tell people about with any of the trending topics, especially, whether it's like, okay, these big banks are now embracing crypto, or here's something people are talking about with meme stocks. And you can say something that doesn't just add to the sea of the same answers.
Exactly.
That's going to get noticed. And, don't be contrarian just to be contrarian. But if you feel that way, I think it's a great opportunity. That's a good time to reach out, because you're going to, you're going to stand out or have a different way of even saying it. Like a reporter came to me yesterday and was asking me, are dinner and seminars still worth it for advisors? And I said, well, I'm sure everybody who's answered has already told you, for the most part, no, that they don't need to do that. So let me explain it in a different way, right? Like trying to think of a different spin on.
Yeah. My advice for that would be to read what's out there, especially if you're reading like my direct competitors, or and you see them saying a lot of the same stuff. Reach out to me with something different. Be like, hey, I'm reading about a lot of the same thing, but haven't read anything about it in this light.
Yeah.
Wow. Because think about it. That's like a part of my job as well, is to not repeat what everyone else is saying, is to have our own take, our own angle, to have something different. And that's what's valuable to you guys. That's why you guys pay to read investment news, right?
So on that note, actually, another good question that just came in, people were asking, so there's a lot of these firms have admins or marketing folks that try to get their bosses' names in the news. Does it matter, or is there a better chance of success if the person reaching out to you is the advisor themselves who's going to give the quote versus somebody on their staff?
Yeah, I saw that question come in and it briefly pop up. I guess if I was being totally honest, would the likelihood of getting quoted be higher if it's coming directly from the person I want to quote? Yeah, because like I said before, that we've already cut through a lot of the steps of like, okay, so your marketing person reaches out to me, and then I gotta read what they're saying, and then I gotta look into who they are that they're offering to talk to me, and then I gotta make sure that fits, and la. Like if the person that wants to be quoted just wants to reach out directly and say, hi, I'm the head of the firm and I can talk about this and I'm available at this time, then that helps. And then, especially I think on first introduction, that probably helps too, because then, maybe after that first initial talk going forward, it's, hey, here's my PR person. Happy to introduce you to them. Let's keep the dialogue going via the PR rep. And by that, I mean, I say that with it helps, a little bit. It just cuts through one more layer. It doesn't mean that if you reach out to me through your marketing person, I'm more to, ignore it or not notice it. No, I'm definitely looking. I just think that, in terms of time, it simply just cuts through a step.
You're always on a deadline, right? These stories can't wait.
Yeah. Anyone on here that's actually interacted with me when I'm on a tight deadline and knows, and I'm like, oh, hey, bye. And Sam probably does. I'll reach out to you at 10 a.m. and be like, I need a quote by noon. So yeah, it can happen really fast. And so that's the other thing is.
I was just going to say, so a couple other things that I wanted to make sure we get to touch on, tips for all of you listening. if you are going to reach out to somebody, for the first time, and then they end up coming to you and they want you to be a source, be willing to put your answer in writing and talk to them on the phone, because having both is really helpful. Also, timeliness, these are stories, usually like breaking news stories or related to timely content. So can't wait till like 5 days later to respond. It needs to happen ASAP. If you are going to use a service like Haro, Help a Reporter Out, which some people said they had good luck with, it can be a mixed bag. There can be people who are, claiming to be journalists, but they're just blog writers that are on there. And then there's other people that are actual journalists writing for bigger publications, and you don't always know. But if you are going to answer a query from something like that, make sure that when you respond, you don't only just respond and say like, yeah, I can answer this, but you give your answer in your response, and that you include your headshot and your bio, so that if they're working on a tight deadline, they have everything they need just to go ahead and run with it, depending on what the story is.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're pretty much coming up to the top of the hour here. If you have questions we didn't get to, I saw some questions coming in about like the SEC marketing rule and compliance. We have a great 10-page guide that we can send you that goes over all of that. Any other questions? Like I said, I'm going to put up our contact information again, so you can reach out to me or Nicole. Let me just, geez. And I'll put Nicole's up here first, because she's probably the one everybody wants. And, you can get in touch there if you have follow-up questions. And then again, if you go to 20over10.com, you'll get all of our great contact information, or you can connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Yes, this has been recorded, and yes, we will send you both the slides and the recording. I think tomorrow is when it should get to all of your inboxes. But Nicole, I just want to thank you so much for being here today and shedding light on this, because I think you gave so much great information that hopefully will help people get a good sense of how to start these relationships. Because again, it all really comes down to relationships and being just helpful.
Exactly. Just like in financial advice, how advisors are having to kind of show that they can connect with their clients on a more relationship level. It's the same thing with, a relationship with a journalist and a source, right? It's a very trusting relationship. We have to trust each other. And it's very two-way. So follow me on Twitter. That's like the place where I'm hanging out. And I recently got verified, so I am officially your news source. Feel free to use me for that. But excited to meet some future sources as well. And thank you so much for having me and bringing me on. And thanks for everyone for listening to me.
Congrats on the blue. That's big time.
Yeah.
I can say I knew you when.
Right. It's interesting the way that just like pops up, and but it is very cool. And for the most part, Twitter just like, people always ask me how that happened. For the most part, Twitter just like emailed me and said, hey, your account has been verified as authentic and notable. Use it wisely. It literally said like, with great responsibility, or with great power comes great responsibility. You didn't have to
do anything. That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for all the work you do in the industry. I love reading what you write, and we are so thankful to have you here today. And everybody, have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye. Thank you.